Hello and welcome. I am Kim Keen, host of the One of a Kind You podcast. I started this podcast to share my journey of my past self, a woman who was struggling with leaving her teaching career and adjusting to stay-at-home mom life, to help other women with their motherhood journeys or their work-life balance journeys so they can let go and make themselves a priority without all the sacrificing. So if you are a regular listener, thank you so much for taking the time to tune into another episode. And if you are new, welcome. We're equally excited to have you join us as well. And the way this podcast usually works is that I share a journal entry of mine from about 7 or 8 years ago, and I reflect on what I know now as a certified life coach and what I wish I knew then in the thick of the struggle. But today we have a special guest with us, and her name is Heidi Fiedler.
Fiedler. Yep.
Fiedler. Okay, I was close. I should have asked before I hit record, but we were just chit-chatting. And so Heidi, she is a writer, an editor, and a creative coach. She is also a mother to a 6-year-old sweet little boy who has autism. And this year they moved from a 6-hour kindergarten day to a 3-hour kindergarten day to help him adjust. And so that means she joined the 2-hour club. And I can totally relate to that 2-hour club. So that means that she only gets about 2 hours a day to work. And she's had to become super strategic about prioritizing her time and pacing herself. And I was just talking to my husband about strategizing and pacing myself today because kids are away. And so I'm like, oh, I have to get all these things done because my girls are away with their aunt. But she thinks that most people would say that she's naturally a cheerful, patient, and generous person. And I can tell that she is naturally cheerful just from chatting with her for the first few minutes before we hit record. And she said she's really grateful for the flexibility that her job has given her. And she don't know how she would get to all of the medical and therapy appointments without that flexibility. But she'll be very glad when they shift back to the 6-hour day next year, which is the ultimate goal. So hopefully they're able to accomplish that. So Heidi, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me here.
You're welcome. So Heidi, is there anything that I missed?
I mean, that, like, hearing it all summed up like that, I was like, yeah, that's where we're at. It feels like it's been an intense year, but I'm always kind of like zooming in, zooming out, and like in the moment it feels like, oh, are we gonna make it? And then when I zoom out, I'm like, okay, we're doing it.
Yes. So just out of curiosity, how come you decided to switch from a 6-hour school day to a 3-hour school day?
Really, it was talking with the teachers and the therapists at the school, and they made the recommendation thinking that it would help our son just adjust to all the demands. He had been in preschool for a little while, in between like pandemic life and starting kindergarten, but it was a much looser environment. It was kind of like just wander around and hang out. And it was not like everyone needs to sit in the circle, everyone needs to do this activity. Now we're changing activities, and now there's like some partner work, and it was just a lot for him. And I think one of the things he really struggles with is being in a group, following directions. It was just so much to learn at once, the routine, all those pieces together. So the hope was that moving to a 3-hour day would really lower the demands and just help him adjust to the environment and the routines. And the way our particular school is set up, I guess that there is a half-day kindergarten option for everyone. And a lot of parents choose the full-day kindergarten option, but the half-day is set up so that like most of the academic stuff is in the morning, and then like there's a little bit of, it's just like a little more free time in the afternoon. So he wasn't missing out on academics, and it was, I'm not sure if it really lowered demands on him. We still ended up going to therapy at a clinic, and it felt like it wasn't like we came home and watched movies or took a nap or something, but I think it lowered demands in terms of being in the groups all the time and transitioning from room to room and activity to activity, I hope.
Yeah, and I think too, when they're so little, it's okay if they don't have a full day of school.
It's a lot for us, and I
Yeah.
know it's a lot for a lot of the other kids. It was nice that we were able to do it, but it was a real shock. So we had 8 hours of care each day at preschool, and then we were going down to 6 hours, and that felt like a little snug to
Mhm.
me, and then to go to 3 hours was really tight.
Yeah, because it feels like as soon as you drop off, you turn around and go back to pick up.
Basically, yeah, I would get a little bit of time to take a walk, tidy up the house, do anything that needed doing for family stuff, work like an hour or two at best, and then go back.
Yeah. And so, um, so so it's interesting because it's, like you're adjusting to your child's school day, but then you're also adjusting to like that mom freedom. So is there something that you found that you really struggled with the most once you had only like when you joined the 2 hour club, or even when you went from 8 hours of care to 6 hours of care? Was there something that you maybe weren't necessarily prepared to be like, oh my gosh, I don't know about this?
I think in all those situations, for me, the first thing to go is usually like the self-care parts of my life. And a lot of times that's exercise, or um even just like being able to go somewhere kind of like frivolously, to like browse somewhere, or like uh go to a museum one day. Like,
Yeah.
all of that was just not an option. And it was, I think immediately when I was like understanding the plan and we were talking about, can we make this work, I understood like the work part of it would be um height. But it wasn't just that there was less time to work, it was more time being on as a mom. And
Mhm.
so I was just more tired during like the 3 hours that I had, or whatever time it was. So a lot of times I didn't want to squeeze work in there. I just wanted to like stare at the wall and recuperate for the next round.
Yeah, you're like, oh my gosh, can I just tag out before I tag back in?
Exactly. Yeah. I think before I was pretty good at shifting from like mom mode to work mode to me mode. And here there was no buffer between those. It was just like very fast
Yes.
changes.
Like a sprint, really, not even a marathon, because when you're on such short increments of time, it becomes a sprint. And you're like, oh my gosh, how do people run these sprints in the Olympics?
They don't do it every day over and over and over. That's how
Right?
they do it, I think.
So then you're like, well, maybe I could be an Olympic athlete.
It does sometimes feel athletic to me. Sometimes I'm like, I feel physically like I moved something uphill, even though I know I was really just mentally, emotionally moving something uphill.
Yes. So, um, so I find it interesting that in this process you've learned how to strategize and pace yourself, because so now my girls are in school. I'm back in the classroom, which I swore I never would be. I'm teaching the 3-year-old. So I'm kind of in the 2 hour club. So when I get home after school, then it's like, okay, I run my kids to all the activities, and in between driving them. So like if I'm waiting in the car at piano or dance or whatever, I'm like trying to squeeze in my life coach, holistic healing, work for that business. And so there are days where I feel like I am literally on the go from 5 a.m. until 10 o'clock at night. And then I have to get up and do it all over again the next day. So I'm like, oh, she figured out how to pace herself. Do tell.
I mean, pace myself in that I do get up and do it again. Pace myself in terms of like it feels easy, I wouldn't say that. But for me, a lot of it is knowing when the next break is going to come. Like,
Hmm.
I can pace myself better if I know like my husband's gonna take over at 4 o'clock, or I'm gonna be sitting outside of OT at 4 o'clock. So like I'll breathe. So like having some predictability around the schedule really matters to me in a way it did not before.
Yeah.
And I think knowing what I'm gonna work on next, like,
Hmm.
so I don't have to waste any brain power or like kind of emotional angst choosing like I'm just like already envisioning sliding into that next task.
Yeah. And do you feel like you are able to put your self care back into that pacing schedule, or do you feel like that's still something that you're working the kinks out on?
I do think I'm okay at it, but it's still fragile. It's like
Hmm.
I want to, and do it, but it's still the first thing to go. It's like everything going according to plan on a regular week. Sure, I've got some walks and stretching and maybe a cat nap in there or something. But, someone gets sick or we have an extra appointment or someone needs to like have a call and that happens to fall during the time that I protected, it just crumbles very easily.
Yeah. Yeah. I can completely understand it. It's at the point where I was like, I had to actually write in like exercise, and whether that was at 4:45 in the morning or 8:45 at night, if I did not write it in for that day, it wasn't going to happen because it's the first thing to go. So I felt like if I wrote it down and I put it in writing, then it was harder for me to say. It could get pushed to the wayside or forgotten until the following week, like, oh, okay, we're back to Monday and I said I was going to exercise today. So I felt like that really helped. But even still, there were days where it was like, even though it was written down, it was like crossed out, like, nope, not today.
It is not happening. I think my other hint for exercise at least is that I'll do it first. If I sit down at my computer, that's a much
Mhm.
harder break to like stand up and be like, and now I'm done and I'm doing this other self-care thing. If I can slip it in before I open the laptop, I'm in a better place.
Yes, 100%. Because I feel like once you open the laptop, it's like a time warp, and
It
time
just
just like literally
yes,
vanishes.
totally. Blinders on and you're just powering through.
Yes, yes. So there were so many things that we said that we could chat about. So um, how has it been? So the other question I have for you is, does your son go to a school that's specific for children with autism, or does he go to just your elementary school that's part of your feeder pattern?
He goes to the public school that's part of our neighborhood, but we moved here to this neighborhood because we had worked with someone that knows the school districts really well and was able to guide us a little bit and
Mhm.
say, this school district is autistic friendly, this one is not. And we had some really awful experiences with the first school district that we were in and just felt really crummy about it. And so we were looking and every person we've interacted with at this other school, this new school, has just been like so great and they're working together really well. It was very challenging to try and buy a house and do all the things around this kind of nebulous concept of like, let's find a school that will work for him. But
Yeah.
we did, and it was very worth it. So he's in the general ed classroom. He has some pullouts. He has a aide that is like supporting him throughout the day, but he's able to get a lot more academics and interaction with neurotypical kids and all of those pieces that we want for him. He's getting it in a way he couldn't at some other schools.
Wow, that's amazing. I asked because I have two very close friends who work for the autistic school here in the state that they live in, so in Delaware. And so one of them, they're both sisters, and one is a para, an assistant, and the other, she started there as a para and then became a special ed teacher, and now she has her certification to be assistant principal. And so there was a time when we were younger in our early 20s, and I lived with my one friend Julie, who's now the assistant principal, and she would do respite sometimes and bring her students home for the weekend. And it was always fascinating with some of the students that she brought home, especially one, because one had a crush on he was my boyfriend at the time, and now he's my husband. So her name was Allison. And whenever she would come over and Pete was there, her eyes lit up and she was like, and she would go, boys, boys. And that's all she would say the whole time until he would leave, and then she'd settle down.
That's awesome. I'm sure he enjoyed that.
Oh yeah, he was like, she's saying that about me, and we were like, because she was an older student, so she was 20, I think, at the time, and now that means that she's almost 40, which is hard to imagine. But yes, so she was maybe even like 17 or 18, but she was an older student who was like on the verge of aging out of their program. So I've seen the amazing things that they are able to do with their program. So I was just curious to know if you had your son in that type of a program, or if he was able to be in just the the public school that was in your feeder pattern.
Yeah, I think if we had been somewhere else, we might have had to explore other options, but
Mhm.
the school has done such a great job. I mean, and I'm sure it has to do with the resources they have. You know, if you don't have resources to throw at it, you just run out of ideas and you do the most rigid, um compliant thing you can think of.
Mhm.
Or, you go to like whatever is recommended first, and if that doesn't work, you just kind of give up and isolate a lot of the kids. But this school has been really like, they have lots of services, they have lots of um it almost feels to me like how like someone like Darwin, like in the 1800s, might have had like a private tutor who was like coming to his house and
Yes.
choosing like the next book about moss that he was going to read or whatever based on his
Uh-huh.
interest. It feels like not that, but it's like a lot of attention and a lot of like figuring out what is engaging and how can we work with your brain and your body and your needs and
Mm.
all of that, which is it's really great.
Yeah, it sounds amazing. I feel like all children need that really because unfortunately education sometimes we can very much put kids at a desk and be like, do this paper, write these words. But it's like, oh, that is boring. No one wants to do that. And it's not really helping them learn in a way that's best for them. So I think it's amazing that they're really dedicated to fostering learning for the children in a way that's meaningful for them instead of just some blanketed approach that's like this one size fits all style that doesn't really necessarily work for anyone.
For sure. And I remember those days, like
Yeah.
that's what I experienced and kind of expected. And it's a strange feeling to feel like you're old and outdated based on your own school experience and be
Yes.
like, oh, that's not how we do things now. Oh, that's good.
It's awful when your kids come home and they need help on their math homework and you're trying to help them, but you're doing it the way that you learned in the 80s and the 90s. And they look at you and like, that's not the way my teacher showed me. I'm like, well, then I can't help you because I don't know the way that your teacher showed you.
I do not get this. No.
Like, brain does not compute. And that I always say to them, and that, girls, is why I teach the littles. I do not teach children over 5 years old. Because I don't want to have to know the new fourth grade math or the fifth grade math or the seventh grade math. No, thank you. My 90s way
No.
works just fine.
I used to work at Teacher Creative Materials, and they had like lots of specialists, lots of teachers that became editors there, and they had like math specialists and whatever. And those teachers that were now editors and parents, they would come in and talk to the math specialist in the morning, trying to get tips to help their kids do the
Uh-huh.
homework at night. And I was like, you guys don't know what's going on. I have no chance. Like, this is so specialized.
Because I'm always like, I will pay you if you just do it with my kid for me. Like, I will pay whatever it costs, you tell me, and I will pay you.
Yes.
Because I don't want to deal with the tears and the crying and the screaming at homework time. So if I can pay you, I will.
Yes, yes. That's the other thing with like the 3 hour day is like it is so much interaction one-on-one, me and my son, which
Mhm.
is great. And I like having that closeness, but I also think like there's so much benefit from having other people be able to guide him and have their way of communicating and not have that relationship be like everything, teacher, parent, therapist, like all those pieces together to say they are teaching phonics, like go forth. They're
Yes,
doing a
like,
great job.
and learn from them this phonics. That
Yes,
is not
I
what
will
I
be
am
the
teaching you.
parent. Yeah.
I felt the same way when my girls were home with me when they were little. After I left my teaching career, it was like I wanted them to be home with me. And I even thought about homeschool. I'm like, I'm a teacher, I can homeschool them. And so I asked my older daughter, who was just maybe 5 or 6 at the time, and she was like, I don't want to be home with you. I want to go to school with my friends. And I was crushed, crushed. I was like, rude. You are so rude. And then she was at school. So I just was like, I resigned myself to the fact that like I just wasn't going to be a homeschool mom. And then when Lily was in school and Casey was home with me, I was like, yeah, I'm really not cut out for this homeschool mom thing. Like, I really need you to go to preschool soon, sooner rather than later, please. Like, I love you and I need you to go see someone else.
I think a lot of parents realize they do not want to do homeschool. It can be great for some people, but it's a lot.
It is. And so then when my older daughter hit fourth grade, I don't know if she met someone that was homeschooled but she heard the word on the street about homeschool life. She was like, because my girls are in private school, she was like, they don't wear uniforms. They don't even have to learn the whole day. She was like, they don't even have homework. She was like, and they go places for school. She was like, why are you not homeschooling us? And I was like, oh, excuse me. Let me explain to you why I am not homeschooling you. Been there, done that, tried that. You told me you didn't want to be home with me. You wanted to go to school with your friends. So you got what you asked for.
Yeah. I think it would only get harder myself the older they got. Like maybe first year. I don't
Yes.
know. But the older they get, the more I'd be like, I'm gonna let someone else take over.
Yes. I'm like, please, because like I said, math, no, thank you. Like high school science, no, thank you. So yes, please. So it all worked out for a reason, but I can remember very much. So even sometimes now when they're home for summer break, I'm like, how many days till school starts?
It's so much planning, and then like we're talking pacing yourself, like this pacing yourself for the summer of like, okay, it's day one, let's lower expectations. Like it is a lot.
Yes, and I think that is super important and is lowering the expectations. And for a long time, that was where I got stuck. And I don't know if that's the same for you, but I had these grand expectations in my mind of how our day was going to go, what their behavior was going to be like. And then when that did not happen, whoo, I could not handle it. I was losing my mind because I'm like, why can't you just do like, hello, don't you know my plan? I've had this whole thing figured out and you're not cooperating.
Yeah, our hardest days would be if I had an agenda of some kind and was like, let's start clicking through these tasks. Like it's gonna be better for both of us if we just see what we're in the mood for and try to transition when we need a snack and like anticipate, some downtime in there.
Yeah, yeah. Small increments, just basically like put one foot in front of the other, just one thing at a time. Let's not get too ahead of ourselves here. And I think that's what I did. I was just like, I had this whole day envisioned in my mind. I was like, I've got to make it from 7 o'clock when your dad leaves from work until 6 o'clock when he gets home. And I am flying by myself. And I have to get through this because I don't want to lose my mind on you. And I don't want to lose my mind on myself. But inevitably I could feel like the smoke coming out of my ears because I'm like, you girls are working against me, not with me here.
Two together sounds trickier too, because yeah, I could feel that dynamic shifting.
Especially when like my older daughter is me to a T. So it's like arguing with myself and my younger daughter is more like my husband. But then when the two of them, it was like tag teaming against me. And I'm like, come on, guys. And then I would get mad because they don't do that to their dad. So I don't know if things are different with your son and your husband than they are with you.
I think inevitably everyone's going to have different relationships, but also if you are the primary person and you spend all that time together, you could spend that much time with anyone and you would eventually annoy each other or just kind of be a little brittle. I do think a little absence helps everyone be like, oh yeah, I like you.
Yeah. Because right now I'm not sure if I
Yeah.
do.
It actually is good to see you again.
And I love how you described it, brittle. I think that is the perfect word, brittle. I'm going to use that more often. I love it. So, and I have to say, like, I just love your, optimism and your positivity about the whole thing because it can get overwhelming when you're like, oh my gosh, I went from 8 hours to 6 hours to 3 hours of care. And like my life is changing. And I know like as parents, we do that, we sacrifice for our kids. But the fact that you just can like laugh about it and find the humor in it, I think is amazing because it's, that can be a hard thing to do.
Yeah, I think that's probably my own natural tendency is I look for the good, or I look for some of the humor. Um, but it is hard, and it's a lot to absorb. Um, I think I'm probably in a better place now, having had our meeting and making a plan for next year. I didn't feel 100% we were going to make the plan to go to the 6-hour day for next year. So I had been telling myself all year, next year is 6 hours. It's gonna be okay. And if they had said, we don't think he's ready for the 6-hour day, I think that could have crushed me a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, especially because you've been building yourself up to it, because then that's the other thing too that was hard. It was like, my girls were in daycare, I was at work all day, and then we switched, and then I was a stay-at-home mom and I had them with me, but then Lily went to school during the day, and then Casey was home with me, and then they were both in school. And so then readjusting to that. And so it was like this weird thing. It was like when you were home with me, I wanted you at school. And now that you're at school, I'm like totally missing you. So it's like constantly readjusting that mindset. And then when things again don't go to plan and you have it like in your mind, then you're like, oh, wait, hold on. You mean I have to readjust again?
Yeah. And I think we're kind of trained that we are supposed to treat work as this, if work is your other thing that you're trying to balance, or just even your own self-care or whatever, but it's like we're trained to think like the time opens up, so we should just turn on a switch and do the work, or do the thing, like do the exercise, whatever it is we were waiting all that time to have time to do.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like, for me, it's just not that simple. Sometimes I need that time to either shake it off and recover. Sometimes it's like you need some transition to be like, where am I now? Do I want to do this work? What feels important or like meaningful right this second? It's not like you just jump in from that stage to the next stage and it's like, on you go. Except that life does go on, and you can sometimes feel this sort of like, I kind of think of it as like jet lag, where you're like, I'm still processing like all of that, and then change is going on.
Yes. And so it's, you don't always have that chance to catch your breath. Are there things that you do during the day where if you feel overwhelmed or you feel, because I know there were times where I just felt overstimulated with my girls. It was like constant talking, constant making noise. The toys made noise. And one of my girlfriends, she put duct tape over the speaker so that the toys
That's
wouldn't be so loud.
smart. Yes, I've like rubber banded some socks on one thing that doesn't really work, but I was like, this is way too loud.
Yes. And so she put duct tape on the speakers so that way the child could still hear the noise, but not at full volume. And I was like, that is genius. I never thought to do that. So are there things that you do to help yourself during the day if you feel like you need that break, but you're not able to have it since you now only have that 3 hours of care?
Yeah, I mean, I I do take mini breaks. Like I will say I need a timeout or I need a break and just walk away sometimes. But also sound, like you're saying, like the loudness of talking and like even cupboards, all that stuff really kind of makes me rattled. And for my son, a lot of what brings him comfort is singing and talking and saying like lots of nonsense things. And he's also really quick to whine sometimes. So I use these things called loops, which are basically like they're earplugs, but they are designed so that you can still kind of hold a conversation if you're
Okay.
like looking at someone, or like I like them because I know where he is in the house. I can hear what he's doing, but it's all just like a little muffled. I don't feel like if I turned the baby monitor 100% down, then I would feel like I don't know where he is
Hmm.
in the house. But with the loops on him, I know where he is. And if he needs something, I can take them out and like go back and forth more. But he wears like I think they call them like ear protectors or something, but like those giant
Yeah.
headphones
Like the
sometimes.
noise canceling headphones.
Yeah. If it's like a school assembly or some sort of
Hmm.
really intense environment for him. And I feel like they're a subtler version of that. And It does help me. It kind of like de-stresses things a tiny bit. And sometimes I'll think like if it's early in the morning and I'm like, I am just so tired. Like I'll think I'll just bring my loops down to breakfast and maybe I'll have them if I need them, like while I'm making breakfast or something. Like just kind of almost like a security item at this point.
I love it, but it also gives you permission to ease into the day instead of just like full on, like smack you in the face, get on with it. And so I think that's brilliant. And I'm totally going to look up these loops, um, earplugs, because when the dogs get to barking, even now, sometimes my girls, they just never stop talking. And especially when I'm trying to work, if I'm in the same room with them, like I'm on the laptop or I'm, writing something or creating something, it's just nonstop talking and so I'm like, oh, I need these. So I am investing in some loops.
They do feel like a little bit of an investment. Like you're like, why am I paying $30 for a pair of earplugs? But they are cute and like a tiny bit like an accessory. Like you feel like maybe it's like a tiny bit of ear jewelry or something. But mostly it's because you can hear enough. Like you aren't tuning everything out. You're tuning out some of the most annoying frequencies, I think.
And I think $30 for sanity is a
Yeah.
bargain.
Yes. And it fits in your pocket. It's a good thing.
And if it's cute at the same time, then that's even just an added bonus.
Yes. I have rose gold.
Ooh, fancy. I love it. So, okay, so loops, ladies, we're getting the loops. We're going to start the loop earplug collective.
Yes. If
That's
you
what we're
see
going to be
someone
known as.
wearing them outside, like give a little ear wiggle or something.
So that we all know that we're rocking the loops. So it's been so fun chatting with you, and I'm just thankful that you have been just so willing to share your story and the ups and the downs of it all, because it makes us feel normal. Because I can tell you, when my girls were home with me and I would lose my patience or thought like, oh my God, when are you going to school? I'm like, you are a horrible mother wishing your kids to go away.
I think it makes sense why we are all so like tightly wound. It is a really challenging job.
Yes. So just thank you for just normalizing the fact that being a mom is a challenging job, and we're all just doing what we can to survive. And even if it means that we're part of the 2 hour club.
Yes, yes, I'm a proud member of the 2 Hour Club, and thank you for having me. It was great
Yeah, of
talking with
course.
you.
Of course. So ladies, if you found this episode helpful, please share it with a friend, because the more the merrier. And if you would be so kind to leave a review, I would greatly appreciate it, because I take the time to read all the reviews to ensure that this podcast continues to be a place of support and guidance, and really a resource, a one-stop shop. So you're not going through the internet rabbit hole trying to find what you need to make it through the day. Because let's face it, at the end of the day, us ladies, we have got to stick together. So thanks so much for tuning in, and I will see you all next week.